public art for Hyde Square with artists Cristina Parreño and Amin Taj. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. We have Spanish interpretation available, and you can access that by clicking the globe icon at the bottom of your screen.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. Antes de comenzar, queremos decirles que tenemos interpretación al español para esta noche y para llegar ahí tienen nada más que oprimir el globito que dice Interpretation en la parte inferior de su pantalla, y si están con nosotros desde su teléfono van a ver 3 puntitos primero y después oprimiendo esos 3 puntitos van a ver interpretación y después van a seleccionar español y finalizar. Bienvenidos.
Please note that this meeting is being recorded. This artist talk is in a webinar format. We welcome questions and comments in the chat, or you can use the Q&A function during the talk. We will have time for a live Q&A towards the end of the hour when we'll go through the questions. If at that time you'd like to ask a question directly to the artist, please raise your hand and we can ask you to join the conversation. On the screen, you can see some guidance for participating via Zoom. If you have any trouble with the features, do let us know. If you're unable to chat, you can email Sarah Rodrigo at sarahrodrigo@boston.gov. And we'll put that in the chat. On this slide, you'll see some recent examples of public art commissions and projects involving the existing collection. You can see that there's quite a variety, and we're excited to continue expanding the city's collection by working with innovative artists on new and exciting projects like the one you're about to hear about. I'm joined by my colleagues at the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, Sarah Rodrigo, Public Art Project Manager, who is managing this project, and Christina McGeehan, Communications Director, who leads all our communications initiatives. The artwork for Hyde Square is what we call a city commission project, meaning the City of Boston, through the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture and in collaboration with other city departments and community partners, has commissioned an artist or artist team to create a new long-term artwork for city property. This project is funded through a generous collaboration with our colleagues in the Public Works Department and through funds from the Percent for Art program. We've also worked closely with a number of amazing community partners throughout the project. I'd like to thank our community partners on this project, Hyde Square Task Force and 3 Squares Main Street, who have been involved since we first drafted and released the call to artists in 2016. They provided input on artist selection and also connected us with community members and local businesses. We'd also like to thank Angel Memorial, who partnered with the city to reconfigure the wall at the corner of their site, and everyone who has given their time and input to this project. We have Rich Parrott and Warren Williams from the 3 Squares Design Committee, and Ken Tangvik and Sarah Briggy from Hyde Square Task Force here with us tonight. We look forward to having them be part of our discussion later on. I'm going to give a quick background on the upcoming public reviews and then hand this over to Sarah Briggy, Community Development and Events Coordinator at Hyde Square Task Force, who will be leading the conversation with the artists. In addition to community meetings like tonight, the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture holds public meetings with the Boston Art Commission to discuss and review public art projects from across the city. Each public artwork we commission is presented a few times at these public meetings, including once for artist selection, once for a preliminary design review, and then again for final design. These meetings are open to the public, are now recorded, and the agendas and slides are available to the public. You can find all this information on boston.gov/publicart. The BAC is an independent board of volunteers that approves and commissions innovative and transformative public artworks around the city. The BAC holds public meetings every second Tuesday of the month to vote on public art projects in Boston. Public art projects are presented and thoughtfully discussed. Members of the public are able to attend, share their thoughts, and ask questions. Please join us. Our next meeting is next Tuesday. The BAC unanimously approved the artists for Hyde Square, as well as the preliminary design. We're looking forward to Christina and Amin's advisory presentation to the BAC on next Tuesday, in anticipation of their final design presentation later this summer. I invite you all to attend next week's meeting, and you can access the meeting information at boston.gov/publicart. And that's brought us here tonight. It is my very great pleasure to introduce Sarah Briggy of the Hyde Square Task Force, who will be talking with the artist tonight. Sarah has been at Hyde Square Task Force since 2017 and oversees community events and programming in Boston's Latin Quarter, as well as organizational fundraising events. She's earned a bachelor's in health, science, society, and policy and sociology from Brandeis University, and a master's of social work, with concentrations in children, youth and families, and policy and community organizing from Boston College. She previously worked with the Youth Ambassadors Program at the South Boston Community Health Center. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm really excited to be here this evening and to introduce both of our artists to you all. So first, I'd like to introduce Cristina Parrino Alonso, who's an architect, designer, and educator at the School of Architecture and Planning at MIT, where her research Trans-Tectonics explores cultural and environmental implications of expanded temporal sensibilities in architectural material practice. Her tectonic translations, material transfers across mediums and temporal scales, human and more than human, embody narratives that are told in the form of essays, exhibitions, and through architectural projects and installations that activate public spaces. Next, I would like to introduce Amin Taj, who received his master's degree in architecture from the University of Tehran. He co-founded VAV Studio in Iran in 2003, through which he has designed and executed numerous public and private projects. His projects have earned him several national and international awards and recognition and have been showcased in several exhibitions, including Venice Biennale 2016 and the Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism in 2017. In 2011, he was invited to MIT as a Victor Scholar, where he met Christina and started his collaboration with her on several architectural and art projects and competitions. He is now a senior associate at NADA, an award-winning Boston-based architectural firm. Since joining NADA, he's been working as the designer and project manager on several public and community-driven projects, including the Adams Street Public Branch Library in Dorchester and the Marble Block Art Center in Bidford, Maine, as well as the development of the Fordham Landing in the Bronx. We're so excited to have this conversation with both of you. Before I jump into the conversation, I just wanted to give everyone a brief overview of the time we'll be spending together. So first, we're going to get to know Christina and Amin a little bit. I am then going to hand it over to them to present on their project that's planned for the Hyde Square Rotary. We'll come back and talk a little bit about the project in more detail, and then we will open it up to you all for a Q&A. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the conversation. So my first question for both of you that I would love to know is, how did you get involved in public art in the first place?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone. We are very excited to be here today. And thank you for this question. I think it's a very important one because for us, this project is very close to our hearts, like kind of the idea of being able to work in a project that involves public art in the city where we live is very important for me. And then I will let Amin talk from his more personal perspective. But from my point of view, I was trained as an architect in Spain, and I have always been very interested in the city and in questions of public space. And I think that that art can make public space more vibrant and more inclusive. And from that perspective, I am very interested in working in the city through public art.
So for me, again, thank you for having us in this webinar. And we are super excited about this project, about having this opportunity to have a kind of installation, permanent installation in this beautiful city, and especially in this beautiful neighborhood. Jamaica Plain is one of the kind of nicest neighborhood in the city in terms of the diversity of both the nature and the kind of interaction between nature and urban spaces, as well as the people that they are living there, is one of the nicest and most diverse neighborhood of the city. And for us having this opportunity, as both of us are immigrants to this city, and we are part of this kind of generation of diversifying this city, is very important, having this opportunity to intervene in a public space, in a public realm of that specific neighborhood. And exactly in that specific location that is somehow cross between all of those cultural kind of groups and cultural ethnicities. So from the beginning of us being involved in this specific project, everything was kind of interesting, and everything was towards somehow producing something that is kind of producing an interaction with the people on that neighborhood.
Yeah, what I love is I hear you both talking about, vibrancy and making things more exclusive and having an intersection of where cultures can collide. And so I'm curious, when you're, out in the world, what are some of the best public art that you've interacted with, either in Boston or anywhere in the world? And what did you love about it?
I mean,
So Christina, do you want to?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that for me, as I was saying, the part that makes me more excited about public art is the side of public art that deals with public space, that is really for the people, and that is really transformative in terms of how people engage with the space. And so I mean, I have many examples. One of them that I would just bring up, just because it happened in Boston not so many years ago. It's one of Janet Eckelman projects in the Ross Kennedy Greenway Park. I don't know if you guys remember that beautiful kind of spider net that was hanging from the buildings, and it was such a transformative and poetic intervention in the city that kind of, I think these are moments when you are touched at another level, right? Like kind of, and I think that is a type of art that I am truly interested. There is another type of art that perhaps has more to do with the with concepts behind it, like kind of, for example, Maya Lin's work on public art has always like kind of a strong message behind issues of the planet or climate change, or and some of the projects that she has developed. I mean, she has many of them, but one like kind of one of the most recent, Ghost Forest in New York. I think it's such a beautiful project that is very experiential, but it also has like kind of an idea behind climate change, or along those lines as well. Olafur Eliasson, for example, with the project Ice Watch. I don't know if you remember this clock that he created with big blocks of ice that he brought from the North Pole, and the idea was like kind of to show what it means, like kind of with a very material connection to ice, to show the citizen like kind of what it meant for these icebergs to be melting, right? And so those are some examples of public works that make me very excited, because they engage the public in ways that I feel are very meaningful, right, for the times that we are living.
So, Christina mentioned two very important projects. One was about a larger scale intervention of the art in the public realm, and the second one was about the storytelling about the story of the earth and the crisis that we are facing now in the climate crisis. I want to add another similar kind of line of a storytelling project. Probably the closest to all of us is the Boston Holocaust Memorial one, that gives the story of the people that went through that kind of crisis and catastrophic condition. And storytelling, that piece of art somehow incorporate human stories in a permanent art installation is something that was interesting for us as well. So I think these three art projects somehow can define the way that we thought about this project that we are presenting. If am I right, Christina? Something that has one scale of urban intervention that define or redefine a space at a large, giving some storytelling both about the permanent or a kind of immediate crisis that we are facing, and giving the story of people that are using that space or interacting with the people through the storytelling of the other people. So these are the projects that we are interested, this kind of projects.
And I love that you mentioned people interacting in the space with that work. And I think as people will learn up next, your art is really rooted in Jamaica Plain and the rotary that it's going to be located. And so before we jump into you presenting about your project, I'm curious, as a JP resident myself, what are some of your favorite things to do in Jamaica Plain, or things that you love about Jamaica Plain?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm Spanish and I live around food, and I think JP is such an incredible place to explore food experiences. And I mean, we haven't done this for a very long time because of COVID, of course, but I remember when we started working on this project, Amin and I would love to go to Jamaica Plain to talk about this project, to start like kind of brainstorming, and we always would brainstorm in a different place, like kind of testing like different restaurants, and we would love the El Oriental de Cuba or like the Old Havana Cuban, like kind of many different places where we would just like kind of meet and eat and feel the vibration, right, of the neighborhood.
So on top of the kind of diversity of the culture that people have there, as I mentioned previously, the diversity of the terrain, the ground, somehow you see rocks, you see nature, you see water, you see all of the kind of possible form of land, or at least as kind of diverse as we can find in any city in that specific location. Somehow coexist of this diversity of land and diversity of the people makes that a specific location a location that cannot be replicated anywhere else. Somehow the superimpose of land and people makes it completely unique and special. So that was another thing that we were talking about a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing those. I love those. And I think it plays really well into what you're going to present on your project. So I'm now going to turn it over to Christina and Amin for a short presentation, sort of digs into the details of their project, and then we'll come back for more questions afterwards.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to share my screen very quickly. You tell me if you can you see the slide? Okay, deep time stories of Jamaica Plain. So this is the title that that we gave to the project, and it has a lot to do with what Amin was mentioning before about the idea of an artwork that is imbued with the stories of the neighborhood, and then the notion of the deep time. Comes from the time of the earth, right? Like kind of deep time is the time that it has taken for the planet to emerge, and it's like kind of this geological time scale that we think it's very important to start to consider, right? Like kind of to start thinking our actions beyond the human time scale, and so it comes from that idea. I'm going to show, to start with these images, just because some of you may have seen them. These are the images that we show to the public and share with the public before COVID. And we received some feedback, and then after these times of, being locked down in our own places, we've had the opportunity to see it and think through the feedback of the community, and also think through new ideas, and also the way the world is changing, and the way our perception of the world is also changing, and how that has affected our project in JP as well. So the project, this is the site plan of Hyde Square. And here we are highlighting the 3 points of intervention of our work. We were always thinking that it was important for Hyde Square, for the Hyde Square artwork, to not be an object, but to actually be a field condition or an intervention that encompassed the full square, so that it had to do with the space, so that it transformed, as I was mentioning before, the public space. It wasn't really about an object, but it was about the urban scale. So this image that I was showing at the beginning is the image that connects, it's one of the 3 pieces that we will develop for the project. Is perhaps the one that resembles more the original configuration, where there were a series of vertical 30-foot or 30 feet transparent poles that they are meant to produce a series of reflections and refractions through the light of the square, transforming the perception of Hyde Square, and somehow bringing a new identity to the place. And we thought it was important that Hyde Square became like kind of a beacon of attraction, and that was recognizable with this new transparency, you know, or materiality. And so now here what I'm showing is like the three interventions, like we decided, and this is like kind of perhaps the part that is newer to the project and that we would like to share, and also welcome your feedback. Is still in the process, but we are very excited with what we are going to share with you. This is as you know, it's a permanent installation that is going to be here for a while, right? For a long time. And so for us, it was important that the project became really about the people of Jamaica Plain. And in that sense, the way we describe the project is as an urban storytelling device. It's a device to tell stories. And so it explores, the project explores methods of deep time intervention. And when I say deep time intervention, again, I'm going back to this idea of the long time, no? Like kind of what it means what do I mean by deep time intervention? It's an intervention in the site that acknowledges that we as humans are currently operating at the timescales that are geological, no? That some of the actions that that some of our actions as humans have consequences that will last our human time. And this is the paradox, no? Like kind of that what we do will be here for more than a generation, more than a civilization, and even more than humankind. And so the work works with this concept and tries to question these lasting legacies and how that should affect a public space, no? So the project develops 3 artifacts in the site that correspond to the 3 main areas of Hyde Square. And each of these artifacts is a different material combination that becomes a different medium for storytelling, no? And again, when I say storytelling, I always say storytelling of Jamaica Plain, where it's really a site-specific intervention that is rooted in this neighborhood. And what each of these artifacts have in common is that they enable the layering of stories at the human scale or at the human time scale, and material narratives that have to do with the geological scale, with the scale of the earth. Now that we think that today we should be paying attention. So in this permanent public installation, the word permanent acquires a whole new dimension. And permanent here relies on 2 types of, or 3, 2 types of, let's say, immortal materials. We are talking here about the old immortals, and the old immortals for us are fossils and rocks, and these are recordings of the geological stories of this place. And then the new immortals, and amongst the new immortals we have plastic, and we have plastic agglomerate rock, which will bear the narratives that of human narratives actually, that will outlast any human generation or civilization. This is the moment when I was mentioning, no, that our human acts are starting to relate to these geological scales. And so the driving force of the project, which was developed through several meetings with Hyde Square Task Force at the very beginning, at the very onset of the project, and it all became really about celebrating the history and the identity of Jamaica Plain. Recently, Amin and I had been having conversations and being very interested in the notion of what constitutes history, right? Like kind of, and who decides what are the stories that make it to history, right? And who are the subjects and the tellers of these stories. And so here for us, the story was understood as the conglomerate of stories across times and across subjects. Among many, many, many others, here in Jamaica Plain, for example, we have stories of the Irish and the Germans that came in the 1800s. We also have stories that were brought by immigrants from South America in the 60s that are very present there right now. We have the rerouting of the Muddy River, which changed the physical boundary of the neighborhood in the 1860s. Stories from the 80s, when Jamaica Plain was known as the cocaine capital of New England, right? Those stories are part of Jamaica Plain. We have the stories of Cuchamaiken. Cuchamaiken was the chief of one of the tribes at Jamaica Pond who gave the name of Jamaica Plain. And it's all about, it's also, and for us this was very important, about the geological narratives of this land prior to the appearance of humans. Jamaica Plain is encroached in a geological formation made of padding stone, otherwise known as the Roxbury conglomerate. Obviously, those that are from Jamaica Plain are very familiar with this rock. And so the project is about this rock, and it's about the stories of the Coleman Quarry, for instance, which for years was the source of this padding stone. And this quarry was filled and permanently closed in the 60s, and it caused numerous job losses, and later became the Kevin Fitzgerald Park, right? So we think that this story should also be it's also part of Jamaica Plain. And then of course, it's about the stories of each and everyone, human and more than human, that lives or has lived in Jamaica Plain, and that is part of the community. And so the project for us is really about discovering the history of the site by revealing the stories of the various subjects that it harbors. And so the first artifact, Future Fossil, is an earth casting piece. And it's meant to transmit stories at both human and geological timescales. At the human scale, through oral stories of the community, and at the geological timescale, through a series of fossils from this area that are cast in place, bringing geological narratives to the piece. No? For us, like kind of the notion that the material bears the narrative, right? There is some knowledge that is embedded in these fossils. And so the specific content and the way the oral stories are shared, we would like to develop in collaboration with groups like, for example, the Story Club in Boston, which is an organization based on Jamaica Plain. But these are all initial thoughts that we are developing now, and that we would welcome for sure the feedback from the community. The second artifact, the Story Rock, is an intervention where the material is one of the first canvases that humans ever used for writing, stone. And so the idea is that a conglomerate of stories of this place will be carved in a big Roxbury conglomerate stone, a stone that has been in Jamaica Plain for the past 600 million years, a stone that has made the foundations of every house in Jamaica Plain, a stone that bears its own narratives, while at the same time will serve as a platform to tell the stories of the first inhabitants until those that live here today. And finally, New Immortals is a message to the future. The material of the whole base here is plastiglomerate. Plastiglomerate is a new type of rock that was announced in 2014 by the Geological Society of America. And plastiglomerate is defined as a multi-composite material made hard by agglutination of rock and molten plastic. And plastiglomerate has started to occur naturally in the meeting of magma and human settlements. So here plastiglomerate becomes an emblem of the imbrication of human and geological processes. It's a sort of new immortal that will enable us to communicate with the generations of the deep future. So the human timescales in this piece come from a collection of artifacts that we would like to collect from the people, from this community, artifacts that hopefully they donate, that they relate to their own stories, to their own concerns about their lives, about civilization, about the planet, and about all these stories that they would like to share with the future. And so in this piece, there is a high component of material experimentation, and we would like to actually work with with the real making of plastic agglomerates. So for that, we are working with Syracuse University with the Lava Lab, who work with molten rock, and we think it could be a really interesting way of produce like kind of an exciting material. And so these are the three artifacts. Conceptually, the idea is that each, this is the last slide, by the way, just to summarize, like the idea is that through material, we tell the stories of the site that are told at different timescales, and the project right now is very open to the feedback of the community from the perspective of how to collect these stories that will come in the form of real narratives, and will also come in the form of material objects that they may want to donate. And so again, we are welcome to receive how to curate these narratives and what are these narratives. So we are very excited to start the second phase of the project, which will be the one really involving the community.
Thank you so much for sharing more about the project, and I'm so excited to see it and see it develop over time. I'm gonna ask a couple of questions now, just more specific about the project, and then I think we'll open it up to Q&A from those who have joined us. So something that really stood out to me as you were speaking was sort of this focus on storytelling and community and how important that will be with the piece. And so I'm curious how you've involved the community in your process and how that's changed the piece, and how that will look moving forward as well, involving the community.
Well, so the first, and I will say this quickly, Amin, and then I would love you to share your thoughts as well of, I mean, how you have seen the process. But the first contact that we had with the community was actually Sarah through Hyde Square Task Force. And there was a first meeting that was organized in the Brendan Beham pub in Hyde Square, where many people from the community came and shared with us their thoughts, their wishes, their ideas. And then that's when we realized that this project had to be, it was not about of proposing an intervention, but it was about proposing a way in which the community could voice their stories. Another instance of meeting with the community was through a very interesting character, Tony Varros, who works as an assistant to the mayor, but is also a very cherished neighbor of Jamaica Plain. And we met with them in Jamaica Plain as well, Amin and I remember that he took us for a walk in the neighborhood, and he made us enter in every single business of the neighborhood, like from hairdressers to pizza place to restaurants, to every single place, and every single place would welcome him in way as if he was family. And so he would introduce us, and it was such a warm way of entering the neighborhood and sharing with them our initial ideas, and also start receiving feedback. Since then, a lot has happened and the world has changed a lot, and the project also has evolved in ways that we feel are very exciting, and we look forward to continue to find ways to involve more and more the community.
So again, as Christina was saying, I was just reviewing what happened after the previous presentation that we had there. And another thing that I think stood out for me was the way that people willing to share their life story with us, just without knowing that it might be the part of this kind of art installation. For example, at the first day, we had the meeting in a bar, and I don't remember the name of the owner, but hearing that was, we were there about 15 minutes earlier, and we were just listening to the story of his life for 15 minutes. And then Tony was another person that he was sharing his story of the way that so all of those stories was something that was interesting for us. All of those people that they were willing to share the way that they went through all of their life stages, and they got to the location that they are, was something that was interesting to us. So it is part of the process that we somehow again re-involve all of those people and try to collect as many as possible of those stories in the way that we can incorporate them in this project, and finding a way that it doesn't become too literal and too kind of personal. So it has the story of a time and a moment of this kind of era, but it is telling a little bit larger scale of a story of people living together or something like this. So yeah, I think we are excited to hear. We are open to all of the suggestions, but mainly we are here to hear those stories and record it in this art.
Awesome. I love that the base was walking around the neighborhood and collecting stories. I think that's such a lovely reflection of the neighborhood that I've also grown to love. I'm going to go ahead and ask you one more question before we open it up to an audience Q&A. And I'm curious, every project obviously has its challenges, and I know this is a project that has evolved over time, and it's also a project that's had to undergo everything that we've all gone through this last year with COVID-19. And so I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about some of the challenges that you've encountered throughout this process.
Amin.
Okay, so I think for our life, there is a story. His story is before COVID and after COVID. So COVID was a period of 1 year that had a lot of things for everybody. I just start from the COVID time. Now, for example, for us we had a lot of personal time, more than what we had previously. And at the same time, we missed everybody else. We missed all of the other human beings around us. We missed interaction. This specific kind of crisis was somehow about it wasn't just about a virus, it was about the social fabric of the entire society. It was a crisis at that level, not just about the health. It was people being apart from each other. So social distancing was something that was not just a kind of recommendation for health, it was a recommendation for 1 year of people's life being separate from each other. So I think, again, it makes our project a little bit more connected to the context of the time, that how we can come out of this crisis, social crisis, I want to call it, and reconnect again with everybody. And that's something that was interesting, that the concurrent of this event and our project, and the way that the project got evolved around exactly the same concept. And before the COVID time, so I would say that you can see the evolution and the reason of the evolution, and the way that we are now cheering or celebrating this context much more, because of exactly missing that thing, missing the understanding how precious is that. Before that, I would say that there was a lot of trial and error for every part of everybody in this project, from us, from the city, from everybody. So we learned a lot. So hopefully we can somehow incorporate whatever we learned into this project.
But I agree. I mean, I agree with Amin that it has been really challenging. Like there have been challenges, and I think COVID has been obviously a very clear one. But I mean we don't need to explain because it has been for all of us. But from the perspective of the project, I feel that COVID, like kind of, it was a time of huge challenge, but also deep growth. I think that COVID made us reflect about us humans and about time and about, I think it relates to what Amin was saying, like what it means to be together, but also what it means to be in the planet, right? Like kind of, I think that it gives us a much broader perspective of what it means, like kind of to be immersed in a crisis that involves the whole earth, right? And I think that somehow the time scale of the geological time scale has been brought quite forcefully through this experience of COVID that has made that, like, I know there is this term that they call it's like one of these new terms that they have invented in order to deal with issues of the Anthropocene or with the experiences of the Anthropocene. And one of these terms is called shadow time. And it's a type of time or sense of time that we are experiencing in parallel to our daily activities with the day-to-day time that has to do with our awareness that there is this other like kind of wider or like kind of a slower time that is happening, and that kind of brings another type of perspective of the things that really matter in life. And I think the things that really matter are perhaps human connections and perhaps like kind of other like kind of those things that cannot be rushed, right? And I feel that all those realizations or like kind of that process of maturity that we have gone through as people, all of us, have definitely influenced the project of JP, for sure.
Thank you so much for sharing those. I think given the time, I would love to open it up to any of our panelists who would like to ask a question or comment or give feedback, as well as any of our attendees are welcome to pop a question into the Q&A that we can get to. But while maybe perhaps people are typing, if any Rich or Ken or Warren or anyone else wants to ask our artists a question, please feel free. Rich, go ahead. You're on mute, Rich.
Is that better? Okay, great. First of all, thank you everyone, to all of you for all of this this work that's gone into the planning and preparation. I love the concept of bringing 600 million years into the to use kind of a cliche word, but I think it's really important, is like the tapestry of what this could be, which is 600 million years of geology interwoven with maybe 1,000 years of human interaction with this area, starting with Native Americans and then all the levels of immigration since then. I'm just kind of curious how some of the concepts can come into what I've seen as a light sculpture, which is absolutely beautiful. And I recall from a different discussion that in the foundations of the light sculptures, there's going to be a place where it's going to be either, because based on the material, a carving of some kind or a molding of some kind of either actual words or symbols that suggest some of these concepts. Is that accurate to say that the messaging and the stories are going to be somehow embedded in the foundational materials? I guess that's the other Amin or to Christina.
Yeah. So again, the project has different kind of interaction with time. For example, if you go there anytime during the day, you're gonna see different interaction between light and all of those translucent poles. And we are hoping that we get a wide range of refractions and colors and this kind of thing on the space. So they have a kind of very direct relationship to minutes and hours of day. So that level of time is also part of the project. Probably it was not clear in this presentation, but it was much more clear in the previous presentation. So we have translucent or transparent poles that are dealing with minutes and hours. We have all of those solid pieces that are, some of them are rock, some of them are probably concrete, that are telling a kind of story of a longer period of the life. So from, as you said, from 6 million years to 60 years, something like the different scale of the times. Yes, the time is the main message of this, the main driver of the kind of configuration of this transparency and the solid pieces. And the way that they are doing differently is very important. The way that they are delivering the message is very important.
Thank you. Just a quick bit of, I probably should start with my background first, just for people to know what my voice represents, which is kind of two voices. One, I live in the neighborhood on Oakview Terrace. And my other voice, which as a my panelist voice is, I've been very lucky to be part of the 3 Squares JP Main Streets organization, which is executive directed by Warren Williams, who's also in the meeting. And over the past 7 years, I've been the chair, well, actually, I've been a member of the design committee, which has several activities. And as of the past sort of year and a half, I've been the chair of the design committee. So as this kind of a sort of a side note in some ways, but now kind of a primary note, I was drawn 23 years ago to JP because of the arts community. That was my primary interest in JP, was the arts community. And then I learned about so much more about JP that I began to love it for so many more reasons. So as a member of the design committee of the 3 Squares organization, I wanted to sort of, I looked at the Hyde Square renovations and saw all these empty cement spaces. That sort of bothered me, I'll say. And I was just wondering how we could make those spaces more interesting. And I learned kind of in a different way that this incredible art installation was actually well along the way. And I was very excited to know that these cement spaces that are just kind of barren actually had a plan with this incredibly exciting, potentially city class, if not world class, art installation. So I'm kind of hoping to make it more a part of the design committee of the 3 Squares JP organization.
Thank you so much, Rich. I just, given time, want to get to the one question that we have in the Q&A from Helen. And she's asking, what are your hopes for how the community will receive and interact with these installations?
Christina, go ahead.
Well, our hopes is that the community will engage with this, will make these installations, will own these installations, that they will really embrace this artwork as a canvas to tell their own stories. And so it's, for us, it will be really, it's really like kind of a placeholder, like kind of what we would like to do is like kind of an artwork that it's really incomplete until the community enters the project. I mean, I don't know if you want to add something.
So again, another thing that I want to add is that the way that we started to think about this project at the very beginning was the way that this art installation has effect more than an object. It has an effect in terms of defining a space in the larger scale more than itself. So that was the reason that first we wanted to have multiple locations. Second, we wanted to have a kind of effect that has something to do with light, refraction, time, and the, for example, sunshine, sunset, and this kind of thing that changes the space at the large. So hopefully we would be successful in achieving both of these, both incorporating the stories and at the same time making that space a very specific square instead of just being a traffic square, becoming a square that is for people to pause for a minute or for a second even, and somehow celebrate the kind of diversity that they have, celebrate or think about at least all of those things, think about all of those concepts of the crisis, time, stories, all of those things. Just having that moment, a pause, makes this project successful.
I also want to add something that now hearing Amin's answer makes me think as well that like kind of this double condition of the project, no, one or maybe three aspects, like one at the meta level, right, like kind of what is this the big idea of the project and the idea of the story of the human and the earth, then the idea of the stories of the people of Jamaica Plain. And so in that sense I was saying that we would love for the community to really be willing to share with us their stories, so they really become part of this artwork. But then the other and very important part is how this artwork will transform the public space of Hyde Square. So it transforms it from a place of a passage to a place of place, right? Like kind of to a space of placeness. And I think the idea of the public space as a in the city as a place where people get together, it's very important, and I think our project can achieve that.
I love that, the moment of pause and those interactions. I think we're gonna wrap up with Warren. So Warren, you can go ahead and ask your question.
First and foremost, thank you guys for all your hard work. Definitely appreciate it. My question is, we have a lot. I hear that you got stories from the businesses, and that's excellent. But that's only like one cog in the wheel to what defines this very unique community, because it's the Latin Quarter and it's a melting pot of diversity. And thinking about the evolution of JP in itself. JP now is not what JP was 20 years ago. Looks very different. It tastes different. It's a different JP. So when we talk about, bridging that gap from what was to what is, I feel like it's really important to get the stories from the people that it reflects right now, like really bringing it from those stories from the past, but being real intentional about what it looks like now, because it's definitely a different JP. I've worked in JP for 25 years and I've seen the change. And I feel like because of the art and culture of JP, it's different mediums of art all the way through. And we kind of want to really make sure that we're thoughtful and intentional about how we capture those stories and who we capture those stories from. Hyde Square is full of millennials now, where 20 years ago it wasn't. It looked very different. So how do we appease and tell those stories of those who live in that district now that can appreciate it for what it was to what it is? I think that's really important. So how are we what's the efforts of trying to incorporate the community now that lives in JP to make sure that their stories are heard and it's also a reflection in the artwork?
Thank you for your comment. exactly, we want to hear this kind of thing. We want to hear how the story should be told. We are not here to say that this is the only way that the story should have been told. So this is exactly what we are after, to hear from you guys. You are the resident of that space, and you're all proud resident of the neighborhood, and you want to somehow this being reflected in this art piece. Another thing that I wanted to just mention from your comments, I think we want to be almost not opposite, but somehow contradictory to the concept of melting pot. We want to say, no, all of those individuals, even though they are American, now they are Cuban American, they are Mexican American, they are Brazilian American, they have another part of their kind of culture that prevents them to be completely melted, and nobody wants them to be melted in this pot. We want them to have their identity as they have it, and we want to show that identity as there is. So I think that exactly as I said, we said at the beginning of that is something that JP is, for example, different from South Boston. South Boston is not that diverse neighborhood. I used to live there, and JP is that kind of neighborhood that people are proudly diverse and proudly live together, and they are kind of exemplary in that kind of way of somehow coexisting and being complementary to each other. So yeah, I think exactly as I said, we want to hear the way that you want to be, the story want to be told.
Can I just add one more piece? I think it's important, and it's just thinking about best practices. Hyde Square Task Force has been phenomenal for years of building that bridge and connecting that gap for where culture has changed and bringing the old to the new and the new to the old. We really rely on them to help us with those efforts of making sure that we're intentional in building that bridge and closing those gaps. So I feel like we really need to lean on them and their expertise on how they have been able to do it for a number of years, connecting the dots and still continuously working with every culture and every population and being intentional about how to use that to reflect the community. That wasn't a question, it was more of a comment.
I see we have a couple hands up. I don't know. I'm gonna let Sarah and Karen make the call of whether we wrap up or whether we want to keep going.
Yeah, well, Ken hasn't had a chance to speak, so I think if you want to be very brief and share something, we are over almost 10 minutes. You want to?
I'll be very brief, and thank you, Warren, for those kind words. And I just wanted to say that you know, someone from the Hyde Square Task Force will definitely be available to cooperate, collaborate, continue with the artists. I want to thank you for your many years that you've dedicated to this. I know Karen and Sarah, Rodrigo as well. This is a long-term commitment that we've all been working towards. It's going to be spectacular. You know, in the middle of this, right before COVID, we got designated as a cultural district, and then we were starting to get momentum. And then, of course, it's been very silent for the past year. But this will help, I think, inspire all of us to come together and get some more momentum going. So I just wanted to thank you and say that we're, you know, like Warren and his team, our team also is ready to support this project and see it through in any way we can.
Thank you, Ken. We appreciate those words and we look forward to collaborating with you guys.
And I just want to jump in and say, this isn't the last conversation. This is sort of a new beginning of continuing on with this conversation. And I want to thank everybody, Christina and Amin and Sarah being great moderator, and for all of our co-hosts, Thank you so much. This is really a wonderful conversation. And thank you, Gabriella, who has been interpreting this entire time as well.
Thank you all. I think we'll stop recording. And yeah, we can look forward to seeing everybody if you're interested.